So when I was 17 years old, I watched a season and a bit of One Tree Hill. And then I frankly stopped because I was not enjoying it. I thought that Dan Scott was the worst, and a lot of the characters just didn't interest me. And then, many years later, there was a little podcast that came out called Drama Queens, who chose to revisit it and talk about some of the sexual harassment and mistreatment that happened on set and reclaiming their show in a feminist way. So I restarted watching it, and I watched the first 3 seasons. And I did really enjoy aspects of it and really struggle with others. But I think that watching it alongside of it and the critique allowed me to enjoy it more. And recently they caught up to the part where I had stopped, because I originally stopped shortly after the shooting just because, I don't know, it just, the way in which it was being handled just didn't interest me. And then I was like, okay, maybe I'm in like the teen mood. I can see all this stuff. I'm up. So I watched about 7 or 8 episodes, and I have now stopped again shortly after the stalker incident. It struck me as the way that it was being dealt with, the ways in which age gap is being dealt with, and the ways in which women are speaking together. And comparing that to the conversation in which these women who are reclaiming the shows, particularly Sophia Bush, Hilary Burton, and Joy Lenz, they're talking about their own experiences and the ways in which they were made to feel uncomfortable, the ways in which they were mistreated, and the ways that they were just expected to be sexualized and to be pitted against each other. And I think that it became really apparent in the assault by Ian Banks, kind of corresponding with and happening at the same time in which we just ended an age gap thing and then began a new one. And yeah, I am only a little bit disturbed by the scene in which we have good man Cooper, who's dating a 17-year-old and then sleeps with her and then is like, ah, yes, so great. We currently also have something going on with Brooke where, she's having an affair with a teacher. She is 18 and technically not a minor, but there is a huge power imbalance. And the ways in which these women talked about how the creators fantasize teenage women. And I thought about even their thing, like the fact that Brooke is like fantasizing about Peyton's father or Uncle Cooper or all these things. That never happens to the older women in the world, really. It only happens to the men. And then I also thought about the ways in which these women are talking to each other. So far, all 4 of the main teenage girls have been slut-shamed this season alone. Haley and Brooke had a whole thing where they just called each other whores and sluts and hussies. And then we also had that between Rachel and Brooke ongoing, just making fun of each other's bodies, slut-shaming each other, going back and forth while also being friendly. And then it has happened between Brooke and Peyton to a large extent. It happened from Rachel making fun of Haley's body and also slut-shaming her. It's funny to me because none of the men are doing this. Like, I think throughout the course of the show there has happened a few times in which they have slut-shamed, but that is not at all equivalent to the ways in which women speak to each other. And these are women being spoken to by, designed, and written by men. I find that very interesting to a large degree just because of the ways in which it is characterizing women against women and men being those saviors. And then we have this last episode that I watched, which just deals with this flashback of Peyton and all of the traumatic things that she has gone through, and her being told that you can't baby her. She has to learn to get on with this. And it's like, this woman was just violently assaulted, thrown around, stalked, and attempted to be sexually assaulted in her own house. And rather than, getting her therapy, making sure that she's never alone, this guy also has not been caught by the police. He is still at large. And it is a baby thing to not be sleeping. I just, wow. But it's also interesting to me because all of these people who have been attempting to assault people have all been characters that were extras. The assault that almost happened against Peyton. Also, this is not even the first time that Peyton has almost been assaulted. She also had an attempt in season 1 and was also saved by Lucas in that. And most people are abused, hurt, killed, murdered, stalked, assaulted by people they know. That is just what happens. It happens in the workplace, it happens in relationships, it happens in all of these things, but the ways in which it is seen on the show is by strangers, because stranger danger is apparently the worst thing ever. I'm not sure exactly what will happen with Nick right now. It also is interesting to me that him and Felix, I believe, are like the only Latinx men, and they have both been incredibly creepy and stalkerish and manipulative to Brooke, so don't love that representation of the United States and, one of their most primary people groups. This comes at an interesting time because I've been just listening on repeat on repeat 29 by Demi Lovato. This is a song that they talk about being 29, the age in which their boyfriend found them at 17 and decided that they would date them. And it talks about how this was framed as a teenage dream, and was it my dream or was it yours? And it has some similar things to All Too Well, which deals with, Taylor Swift talking about being young. She, again, was not a minor, but she was very young. or the song by Billie Eilish that I love called Your Power that talks about like the ways in which we strip back things and how sexualization of teenagers happens. And I just recently turned 25, which means I have now been an adult as long as I was a teenager. And it is interesting to me that throughout my entire 20s, I have not received probably a quarter of the attention I received as a teenager, especially as a minor teenager. And just the sheer amount of people that harassed or made comments or told me that they couldn't wait to date me when I turned 18, that exact comment was made to me at least by 10 different people as a teenager. Sometimes as young as 14, I got that comment. I had several times in which adult men gave me alcohol after I told them that I didn't want alcohol and just gave me a drink and it had alcohol in it. Things like this happened at my work. They happened at my school in which I had a teacher sexualize me. And all of this happened in the case of people that I knew that were either family friends or like at events where, you know, people knew me and were around them. This did not primarily happen by strangers. It sometimes did, but not primarily. I remember being 16 and watching Pretty Little Liars and I think that Ezra and Arya were just so cute, and then watching and then showing it to my friend who was horrified and would not watch it. And it's probably because they were gay and they realized that this was not at all good, but like I was like, oh, this is romantic and like, you know, Romeo and Juliet, hidden and forbidden love, and oh my goodness. And when I got older, even 19, like 2 or 3 years later, I was horrified about it because I was actually old enough to realize that it was incredibly terrible and traumatic, and yet it is something that continues to show up, that sexualization and like girls going to their teachers and being like, oh, that's really sexy. I don't want to talk at length about my own experience, but I did actually have this from a teacher. I had a teacher who made sexual comments to me as a freshman, and it made me so deeply uncomfortable that I just decided to completely not take that route anymore. It was an area of study that I was actually really, really passionate about, and to this day still regret not taking, but he was the only teacher who offered those courses, so I could not go on because I knew that every single time I went in there, I would receive, you know, nice compliments on my body, on my appearance, all kinds of things. And that made me deeply uncomfortable as a 14-year-old to have that happen by a teacher who was in his 30s. It's not something that we girls, literal children, were looking at our 30-year-old teachers being like, ooh, or our 40-year-old teachers, or however old they were. We were not sexualizing them, and yet they were sexualizing us. And I'm not the only girl who experienced this in school, yet it is a continual thread that still happens in media today. And then we also get to the way in which the women talk to each other. I don't think I've ever been called fat by another girl. I have gotten it from mothers and like older women in my life, but I don't think a contemporary has ever said that to me. I have been called a whore a few times, as well as some creative expletives by other women, but not primarily. The amount of times I've been called names by other women is dwarfed by the amount of times that I've received it from men. That is the thing that just drives me nuts about this, is that these women are every single episode, sometimes every interaction, are slut shaming each other and calling each other fat and calling each other ugly and all of these things. And it is gross and it is disgusting. And I know it's 2006, I think, currently in their time, but that does not make it excusable. And I think that the drama queens girls literally talked about, like, we don't talk to each other that way. Like, that is not the ways in which women typically talk to each other. And it is really, really disgusting to see that represented. And just, it is something that I still see in media today, where teenagers or other things will, you know, comment on each other's bodies and be like, oh, you're so whatever. I don't know if I'm just hanging out in the wrong crowds or the right crowds, but that has never been an instance in which I have ever really dealt with that. I've never really been in a situation where I have seen other women like just tear down someone else or someone else do it to me. Like, yes, sometimes people are snarky or mean or terrible or they hate you and it will happen, but not like as a primary thing, and not like to every single other woman. Like, I have dealt with women who hate my guts and will say cruel things to me, but those are a singularity. Those are not every single woman every single day in every single conversation. This is just my ranting thing on how it really disturbs me to see this, you know, in the 2000s, or to see it reflected now, in which these characters are kind of puppeteered and made to see the women who say the worst things possible about other women and who, you know, desire after these older, you know, elusive men and have all of these things and have these fantasies about dating older men and, you know, are only ever harmed by strange men who are saved by their, love interests and stuff like that. When, I don't know about you, but most of my uncomfortable, terrible, manipulative, and abusive situations that have been by men I have been in relationships with, or who wanted to be in a relationship with me, and or at least mutual friends. Those have all happened within that. I've only had a few situations in my life by strangers that have gone anything more than catcalling, which again, catcalling is terrible, but it is very different than the ways in which it is manifested here. And yeah, it really disturbs me, and this is something that probably just doesn't make sense, but listening to my feminist playlist of angry women and non-binary people just being like, the ways in which men manipulate it to let us believe that we are somehow desiring of their control and desiring of these things that are actually manipulated for our own harm, and the ways in which we are puppeteered against each other in the media, that it becomes a thing that we apparently do each other when it's primarily men doing it to us. And that is my rant for today. I don't know if it's a necessary rant. I know a lot of people already know it, but I just wanted to get it off my chest because I was feeling all the rage.